plane. So distance between two different points. So the distance between 2 points is the length of the segment with those points as its endpoints. Okay, so you have your segment with endpoints here. Our distance is the distance between those two endpoints. Okay, it's that length between those two endpoints. So the coordinates of the points can be used to find the length. Okay, so your coordinates on a number line or your coordinate on a coordinate plane can help you find that distance or length. Now before I keep going here, is segment QP the same as segment PQ? Yes. Okay, so for our segments, we can switch our endpoints around just like we could in our line. Okay, it's the same segment. Congruent, do you remember what congruent is from yesterday? They're the same. Okay, so congruent segments are segments with the same measure or equal measures. Okay, so they have the same measure. So we're going to look at the distance formula two different ways here. So first on a number line. Okay, so the distance formula on a number line is the absolute value of the difference between their coordinates. Difference meaning subtraction. Okay, so absolute value of their difference between the coordinates. So here I have point P and point Q. We have x sub 1 and x sub 2. So to find the distance of PQ, I would take the absolute value of one of my points, so x sub 1, subtract my other point, x sub 2. Again, it's just the absolute value of that difference. Okay, since it's on a number line, you can flip-flop x sub 1 and x sub 2. So, or you could have the absolute value of x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Okay, doesn't matter the order. Other distance formula on our coordinate plane, a little bit more complicated. So if my point P has a coordinate of x sub 1, y sub 1, and Q has a coordinate of x sub 2, y sub 2, then we can use this formula here to find the distance between point P and point Q. Okay, this is our distance formula. It's the square root of x sub 2 minus x sub 1 squared, that quantity is squared, plus y sub 2 minus y sub 1, that quantity is squared. Okay, the order of the x and y coordinates is very important. Okay, so your order here is important. Before on the number line, order didn't matter. Over here, your order is important. So if I start with point Q, using my x's, so x sub 2, I have to start with point Q with my y's then. Okay, so that's how that order is important. This is how it would look like on your graph. Okay, they are coordinate points, and you're just finding the distance between those 2 points. Questions before we get into some examples? Okay, then first we're going to practice on a number line. So for number 1, we want to find the distance of BE. Again, when we're finding length of a segment, we don't use the segment bar above those 2 letters. Okay, we're finding the length. So no segment bar there. So to find BE, I'm going to use my absolute value formula here. So I need point B. Point B is at -6. Minus point E is at 2. And I'm taking the absolute value of that difference. So I get the absolute value of -8, which is 8. Okay, we'll do another one here. Number 2, we're finding the length of AC. Okay, so using my formula again, I need point A. Point A is at -7. Subtract point C. Point C is at -4. Okay, so I have -7 minus a -4. That is the absolute value of -3. I'm going to make my absolute value signs a little longer here, which is 3. Questions on those two problems? All right, do 3 and 4. All right, so most people are done here. So for the distance of CF, you should get 9. And for FB, you should get 11. Okay, on a number line, if you don't want to use this formula, you can count between points. Okay, that's going to be your distance. Make it a little easier, just counting. Okay, questions on those? All right, then on the back here, we're going to find the distance now between 2 coordinate points. So we're using that other formula. So just so you don't have to keep flipping back and forth here, I'm going to write it at the top. Okay, so our distance is the square root of x sub 2 minus x sub 1 quantity squared plus y sub 2 minus y sub 1 quantity squared. Okay, and all that needs to be underneath that radical symbol or that square root symbol. Okay, so that's the formula we're going to use. So for number 5, 6, 7, and 8, we're using this formula and the points on our segment. So we want to find CD given our 2 coordinates. Now when I'm using the distance formula, I like to label my coordinates, x sub 1, y sub 1, and x sub 2, y sub 2. So it's a little bit easier to plug into this formula. So for point C, I'm going to label that one x sub 1 and y sub 1. So -4 is x sub 1, -6 is y sub 1. And point D, I'll label as x sub 2 and y sub 2. Okay, and I just label those underneath. You can label them above, doesn't matter where. From here, all it is plugging those values into that formula. So I'm finding the distance. I have my square root. X sub 2 is right here, that's 5. Minus x sub 1, that's -4. That quantity is squared. Plus, my y sub 2 value is -1. Minus y sub 1 is -6. And that quantity is squared. Okay, from here I'm just going to simplify it a little bit. Okay, so I have 5 minus a -4. That's 9, and that has to be squared. Okay, plus I have -1 minus a -6. That's 5. So I have 9 squared plus 5 squared. You cannot say this is 9 plus 5. Okay, you cannot take the square root of those separately. You actually have to square both of those numbers and add them together. Okay, so 9 squared is 81. 5 squared is 25. Again, I have to add those together to get the square root of 106. And I can leave it like that. Okay, you don't have to plug it into your calculator. You can leave it like that. This one doesn't simplify. Okay, this one doesn't simplify at all. But if you do want to plug it into your calculator, you get about 10.3. Okay, so again, don't need to plug it into your calculator. I always write both. You can just leave it in that radical symbol. It is the more exact answer. Okay, questions on number 5. All right, then number 6, we're doing the same thing. We're finding EF. So again, I'm going to label my points. Okay, so point E will be at x sub 1 and y sub 1. Point F will be at x sub 2 and y sub 2. From here, I'm just going to plug those into my formula again. So we're finding the distance. So x sub 2 is first, that's 8, minus x sub 1 is negative 5, and that quantity is squared, plus y sub 2 is negative 4, minus y sub 1 is 6, and that quantity is squared. Then I want to just simplify this then. So I have 8 minus negative 5. That's 13. And 13 should be squared. I have negative 4 minus 6. That's negative 10. And that should be squared. And I'm putting negative 10 in parentheses because you have to square that negative as well. Okay, you have to square that negative as well. So when I square 13, I get 169. And when I square negative 10, I get 100. Okay, so these should always both be positive. Okay, even if you get that negative value here, you should end up with a positive number. Okay, then I just add those together to get the square root of 269. Again, that one can't be simplified. I tried, it doesn't work. So I can leave it like this, or if I want to, I can put it in my calculator to get an approximation. And that is about 16.4. But again, you could write either. Questions? All right, do number 7. You done? Again, if you guys finish early, And you want to just keep going, just let me know. I'll check that you finished it, and then I will give you your assignment to start working on.
And do you want one?
Like up on the board?
Yeah, like
Just pretend. I can do the next problem with a marker.
Oh.
You guys are really nice. Are you most people done with number 7? Yeah?
the board is so productive.
Alright.
Oh,
So make sure you label your points if you're still confused about the order. Okay? So we have x sub 2 is -3 minus x sub 1 is 4. That quantity squared plus y sub 2 is -7 minus y sub 1 is 3. That quantity is squared. Let's extend this here. So I should end up here simplifying to -7 squared plus -10 squared. So I have the square root of 49 plus 100, which is the square root of 149. Is that what we got? Yes? Good? If you wrote it as a decimal, I think that's about 12.2. Is that right? Okay. Questions on number 7? And very similar. Can I erase? Yeah, anyways. So I can move on to number 8. Okay, so number 8 is very similar to what we just did, except this time you're given a graph. So since I'm given a graph, I have to find those coordinate points. So I have to find what point M is and point Z. So I'm going from the origin. I'm going to go left 1, 2, 3, 4, and down 1. So point M is at -4, -1. So I just want to write out those coordinates. Point Z is at 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So Z is at 3, 3. And again, all I have to do is use my distance formula from here. So I can label my points, x sub 1, y sub 1, and x sub 2, y sub 2, and plug them into my distance formula. Okay, so we have x sub 2 is 3, minus x sub 1 is -4. That quantity is squared. Plus y sub 2 is 3, minus y sub 1 is -1. And that quantity is squared. Okay, simplifying, I have 3 minus a -4. That is 7. Plus 3 minus a -1. That is 4. So I end up with the square root of 49 plus 16. Which is equal to the square root of 65. And again, you can leave it as the square root of 65. Again, this one does not simplify. I believe there's only one on your assignment that actually simplifies, if you remember how to do that. But this will be about 8.1. Okay, questions on your distance formula? Yep.
Are we going to have to memorize it?
No. Good question. All right, I want you to do number 9. Number 9 is just like what we did yesterday in class. Okay, so draw out that segment, label it, find the value of x and the value of BC if you haven't already. Hi. Yes.
I was just confused because, you know, that's what.
No, you already took this class. But this is so much easier. Yeah, you already took this class. You done already?
Yeah.
All right, those of you who are just finishing up number 9, you should get x is equal to 15 and BC is equal to 33. So you want to add those two smaller segments together, set it equal to the larger. And I know most people were done or finishing up that problem. Okay, I did hand out your assignment to everyone. And I do want to tell you who's doing what numbers. We only have 3 people. Yay. So, let me get there first, because I got to do a random one. How many people are in your class? Who's last? 25? Yeah? I don't remember how many people are in your class. $25.
Show you right. After tomorrow.
Yeah. So number 7. Who's number 7? Did you do one already? No? Can you do number 2 tomorrow? So circle that one. Number 4. Who's number 4? Did you do one? You can do number 6? Okay. Can you? No, you can't write it up right now. Trying to think of who hasn't done one yet. Did number 11 go yet? Do we know who number 11 is? Okay, I'm gonna give you new numbers next week, anyways. Number 8. Who's number 8? We don't remember. It's fine. Who's 25? Who's last? You already went though, didn't you? 1? Did 1 go? Yeah. 21? Can you do number 9 tomorrow?
Which one is X of 1 and which one's X of 2?
It doesn't matter. Just as long as you label, like if you label this one X of 1, Y sub 1, then this is X of 2, Y sub 2. So it doesn't matter.